Okay, just picture this for a second. Imagine a place where, I don't know, time just works differently. Minutes feel like hours. You're processing data in milliseconds.
Yeah, and the decisions you're making have, like, enormous weight. We're talking huge financial implications.
Exactly. It's not just stressful, it's this constant sprint.
Yeah.
Maximum mental pressure day in, day out.
And that kind of high-speed environment, you often see it with professional traders.
Yeah.
That's really what we're digging into today.
Right. So this deep dive, it's all about trader resilience, stress, reset, and mental health.
Yeah.
And our mission really is to get past the usual advice and pull out the core strategies these pros actually use to decompress.
To reset.
Yeah, we look through the source material,
Yeah.
and one thing is just crystal clear. Speed and stress, they're completely tangled together. The faster things move,
Mm-hmm.
the more the adrenaline pumps, yeah. And the more you desperately need some kind of organized way to hit the mental reset button.
And that's where the value is for you listening. Maybe you're not trading futures, but if you're dealing with high-stakes meetings or crazy deadlines, managing tons of information.
Right, basically any high-pressure situation.
Exactly. These techniques, they're kind of a shortcut to understanding how the best performers manage their internal state when everything outside is just dialed up to 11.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. After the day is done, or maybe just after hours of intense focus, how do these professionals actually break that cycle, that physical and cognitive loop?
Yeah, how do you stop the cortisol, the adrenaline still racing around?
Exactly.
Well, you can't just, tell your nervous system, hey, chill out. It doesn't quite work like that. It needs a structured intervention.
Okay, and our sources, they lay out some foundational things pretty clearly. The most popular, the most common decompression methods, these are the physical resets. Things like taking walks, doing intense workouts, even basic mindfulness meditation. Walks, workouts, meditation. I mean, I worry that sounds a bit
Yeah.
generic.
Well,
You hear that advice for everything. Are they really powerful enough for that level of intensity? The sheer speed of a trading day?
that's a fair question. But their power, it really lies in how they work, the mechanism. They force a system shift.
Okay.
So an intense workout, for example, it isn't just about general stress relief. It strategically uses that built-up fight-or-flight energy. You're physically burning off the stress hormones that were primed for, market battle.
Ah, I see. Using the energy that was built up.
Right. And the walk, especially if it's out in nature, that taps into the parasympathetic nervous system. It helps slow your heart rate, slow your breathing. These are really the foundations meant to stabilize the body first.
Got it. So the physical movement is like the off-ramp for the physiological buildup.
Yeah.
But what about the mental noise? The constant replaying of trades, the what-ifs,
Yeah.
that doesn't just vanish on a walk.
No, absolutely.
So that's where the next layer comes in, right? With the source is called cognitive tricks to break the stress loop.
Precisely. And this is where we shift from general relaxation, like meditation, to really targeted mental tactics.
Yeah.
Because the mind is stuck, right? Replaying market stuff.
Mhm.
So the trick is to force your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, to engage with something totally different, something highly demanding and crucially not market related.
Okay, give us an example. What kind of tricks are we talking about?
Yeah.
You can't just say cognitive tricks and leave us hanging.
Fair enough. Okay, so the goal is distraction through extreme engagement. One synthesized example is forced mental calculation.
Like math problems.
Yeah, like suddenly switching from thinking about the S&P 500 to calculating the cube root of 608 to 1,472 and doing it again and again. The sheer complexity demands all your mental bandwidth. It just forces the market thoughts out. Another thing we saw mentioned is sudden, intense sensory shifts, like plunging your hands or face into ice-cold water.
Furiously.
Yeah, it triggers something called the mammalian dive reflex. It's this physiological reset that instantly slows the heart rate and, crucially, snaps you out of that looping thought pattern.
That is fascinating. So it's not about passively waiting for the stress to fade. It's actively like short-circuiting the brain,
You got it.
hijacking the focus with something urgent,
Yeah.
but totally unrelated to finance.
That's the mechanism, yeah. If you're stuck in the office, you can't physically escape. You use these mental speed bumps. Make that highway of financial worry, impassable for a bit.
Okay, this makes sense. Now let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the emotional extremes. We usually focus on resilience in terms of managing fear, managing loss. But what about success? A massive win must create its own intense peak, right? Euphoria, feeling invincible.
Oh, absolutely.
That emotional high, I imagine, could be just as dangerous for decision-making as a big loss.
It is absolutely critical to recognize that, yes. Extreme emotional states, whether it's elation or despair, they both threaten rational thinking, rational stability.
hmm And this brings us to the second major strategy we saw, implementing rituals for winding down after big wins or losses.
Mm.
Rituals. That word suggests something very deliberate, very disciplined. Why would a trader who just had a huge win need the same structured process as someone who just lost? Isn't like tamping down the joy of a win a bit unnatural? Why suppress the victory?
That's a really great point, and it forces us to look beyond just the immediate feeling. The ritual isn't really there to suppress the victory itself, it's there to suppress the recklessness that often follows.
Oh, okay.
Euphoria, feeling like you can't lose, that can breed overconfidence, which then leads to taking way too much risk on the very next trade. The source material really emphasizes that these rituals are about stability, maintaining an even keel.
So the ritual acts like a behavioral anchor. It pulls the winner back down to earth before they, double their position size just because they feel invincible.
Exactly. And it stops the loser from spiraling into revenge trading or just freezing up.
Right.
The ritual standardizes that transition, getting you back to a baseline rational state. So, for instance, a ritual might be something specific like a 5-minute desk shutdown sequence
Yeah.
every time, followed by writing just a 2-sentence objective summary of the day. No emotion, just facts before you physically leave the trading floor.
Okay.
By sticking to that established procedure, they enforce discipline right when their emotional wiring is screaming at them to do something impulsive.
It takes the decision of what do I do now out of the emotional equation. It becomes automatic.
Hmm.
That really is professional mental hygiene, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's fascinating is how accepted it is professionally. This idea that volatility in your own emotional state is just as damaging as market volatility,
Huh?
if you can manage the first one.
You've got a much better shot at handling the second.
Precisely. Drastically improves your chances.
Okay, so we've covered prevention, the physical resets, and reactions, these structure rituals for the extremes.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if the system breaks down? We need to talk about detection. If these stress management tools start to fail, what are the warning signs? What should people look out for?
Yeah, shifting from prevention and recovery to detection is so important because if you're going to build resilience, you also have to spot the burnout red flags before that chronic stress leads to a real system failure. It's maybe the most crucial form of self-monitoring.
And I guess if you're a high-intensity professional listening, and suddenly those baseline strategies, the workouts, the cognitive tricks, the rituals, if they start feeling like this monumental effort, like it's really hard to make yourself do them, that itself has got to be a red flag, right? Drifting away from your own discipline. That is red flag number one, absolutely. Adherence drift. That's sudden or maybe growing inability to stick to your own recovery plan. But our sources also point to some more insidious signs. We can sort of pull together a few key examples of what signals that shift from just high stress to genuine burnout risk. Okay, lay them out for us. What should we be looking for, maybe in ourselves or even in our colleagues?
Okay, so first, something like emotional blunting or maybe cynicism. You just stop feeling the wins and losses properly. The market swings don't really register emotionally anymore. That often signals your brain kind of putting up a defensive wall.
Interesting. So emotional extremes are bad, but the absence of appropriate emotion is also a danger sign.
Exactly. It suggests the system is overloaded and just sort of shutting down inputs.
Okay, what else?
Second, look for catastrophic thinking or even paranoia. This sudden, really outsized fear about the economy or the firm or personal finances, even when the actual data looks okay. That's the stressed brain just running wild with worst-case scenarios.
Right, unchecked anxiety, just projecting disaster.
Yeah. And the third major red flag is maybe the most obvious one in a high-risk job. Risk profile distortion. How does that show up?
Well, it can manifest in two main ways, either crippling indecision, just paralysis.
Can't pull the trigger.
Right. Or, and this can be more dangerous, a sudden increase in seemingly reckless, impulsive trades, stuff that's way outside your normal rules or parameters. It's that moment when chronic fatigue and anxiety just override your rational decision-making model.
Wow. It really is the difference between like doing preventative maintenance on your car versus discovering the engine seize because you ignored the oil light for months.
That's a good analogy.
Recognizing these signs, the adherence drift, the emotional blunting, the risk distortion, it's a critical piece of staying resilient. And it brings up a really important question for anyone working under pressure, doesn't it? Are you tracking your mental state, your adherence to your own protocols with the same rigor you track your P&L?
Oof. That's a tough question for many, I suspect.
If the answer is no, well, you've identified a pretty significant blind spot in your system.
Yeah. This has been incredibly insightful. We've really established that resilience in these high-pressure environments isn't just about being tough. It's a deliberate, structured, kind of multi-layered approach.
Hmm.
Starts with those foundational physical resets, moves to targeted mental tactics like the cognitive tricks, gets stabilized by these very procedural rituals for handling emotional highs and lows.
Right, for any extreme.
And then it's all protected by being constantly watchful for those burnout red flags, like the adherence drift we talked about.
Yeah, we've basically shown that thriving in a high-speed world takes more than just sharp analysis. It needs a meticulously managed human operator behind the screen.
So what does all this mean for the bigger picture then? If speed inevitably creates stress, and we know stress undermines good decisions,
Yeah.
we have to look at the whole equation differently.
Hmm.
If most traders have access to pretty similar data, similar tools, what percentage of long-term success actually comes down to how well they managed that inevitable stress, rather than just how good their initial market predictions are?
That really is the core competitive question, isn't it? If everyone's starting with roughly the same information, the edge, the endurance advantage, it must lie with the person who can stay stable, stay disciplined, stick to their system when things get tough.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if success in these high-stakes fields is maybe less about being the absolute smartest person in the room and maybe more about being the most consistent, the most resilient operator over the long haul.
Something for you to definitely mull over until our next deep dive.